Hey, if you can see me on the replay, hello. I am going to be the only one today, unless something changes, but I'm going to be the only one today. Obviously, it's December, so I already knew that the chances of everyone being able to make the live show were pretty slim, but obviously things came up and that is totally fine. But just want to let you know it's just me. So, if you are here in the chat, I'm happy to talk to you about the book. Otherwise, well, either way, truly, this is going to be a pretty short live show because since I already will have the standalone video for it. But this is for The Conspiracy of Kings, which is my least favorite book in my favorite series, The Queen's Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. You're probably familiar if you're here, I would assume, for the fourth book live show, but it is my least favorite. It obviously follows Sophus, and I do really like Sophus, but not as a main character, right? I like him as a side character. He is kind of like, I don't know, he's the youngest of the group. He's the youngest brother for Jen, and obviously Edis does not view him as a brother, but he's just the youngest. He's very lovable. He's a little bit naive, but not to the point where he is ineffective. I think he has a lot of imposter syndrome about being king and about being the heir. And I don't think he is as deserving of all that as he thinks he is because, he's not a pawn. He's not a lamb, as we saw in the book. And obviously, he is younger than them. But this is, again, one of those books where we really see kind of the transition into adulthood for him. Despite, being a young man at the beginning of the book, he's more childlike than he is at the end, for sure. Hello, Carrie. It is different from the others. It's a very different, I don't know. It's almost like a side quest. It's a different tone, different character. I was reading this book and I had gotten to the part where Sophus is talking to Edis and telling him about his time in slavery and about meeting Eugenides as the king of Aetolia. And I was like, all right, well, we have reached the end of everything I remember about this book. I don't remember what else is going to happen. And we still have a lot of book left. So I found that interesting, how for the Queen of Aetolia and this book, there was like a huge section of the book. I really couldn't remember what had happened. And I also always think that Sophus is narrating the story to Eugenides and forget that he is narrating it to Edis. Yeah. And imposter syndrome, the very idea of everyone being disappointed with you, and also you figure someone who is a royal heir, royalty being larger than life and, something that people just expect a lot of. They expect to be impressed. And if you, as the heir, are very used to not only the people who know you being disappointed in you, but also the people who are seeing you for the first time, being like, oh, oh, you're the future king. I can see that really being a part of your identity. It's like it's preparing and putting the pieces in place for the end, or Jen is. The next book fits that too. Absolutely. Absolutely. I like the next book more, even though I think in some ways it does have quite a bit in common with this book. You're kind of on a side quest, you're with different characters. You're definitely, while it is interesting on its own for sure, and not like middle book syndrome or anything like that, this book and the next book are really, transitional books to take us from Eugenides becoming the king of Aetolia all the way to the end of the series. But I do like the next book more, or at least I remember liking it more. I think it's just because Sophus is, for me, a better side character than main character, even though he's very sweet. He's very sweet. I like him. I think that he does grow into where he can be a good king. I also think that he has a very effective support system for that with the Magus, with Edis, with Eugenides. And obviously we didn't see a lot of the Sunitians, but he definitely has support there as well. So what he maybe doesn't have all on his own at this age, I definitely think that he has access to resources for it. And that I think that she does a compelling job of making you believe that he's going to grow and thrive and, just be a good king. He's going to continue to just be better at his job, right? I like that this book expanded the political setting back out after focusing so closely on Natolia for the last couple of books. I think that that is a very good point. And you're right, because the series overall is really about these three countries, right? And their struggle against the Mede is this whole peninsula, this little peninsula. And I do find it very interesting how all of the rulers are so intertwined, almost like a friend group, but not really, because you have all these different marriages. And obviously, Jen and Edis, the middle country, but also the two people from that country are kind of the uniters of the two outliers. But I think that it was necessary, right? Because just like we've seen throughout the whole series, a big political theme of these books is that you cannot say that your neighbor is a necessary sacrifice, right? You can't decide that conquering them in the name of peace is the best move because your neighbor is going to take issue with that, same as you would if they tried to take your country over. And so how do you unite them? I think that was a very interesting solution, kind of. And also, again, I really, really liked in this one how we saw Atolia's advice to Sunis and how she was like to Edis and Eugenides that, your taking over of the country was completely different. And I'm telling you, he needs to listen to my advice. I was amused by his WWGD attitude. What would Jen do? Especially in the first part. As his confidence grew, he didn't need to consider what Jen would do, and it became, what will I do? Absolutely. Honestly, such a great time for me personally, seeing him reminisce on the trip with Eugenides, seeing Pole mentioned so much, even though he hasn't been around for obvious reasons since the first book. It was nice to see him remembered and talked about, and how much Sophus, really just was so like Eugenides and the Magus and Pole had such a formative, or were so formative of his character, of the way that he thinks, of who he trusts, and just the person, just the man that he became, truly. Because just imagine his life without the three of them. Obviously, part of all three of theirs main effectiveness is that they cared about him, right? They didn't care that he was the heir of Sunis like Hyacinth did. Hyacinth, who was happy to just be his friend and agreed with everything he said because he was much more interested in his position as the future king than him as a person. But, these three people didn't owe him any loyalty, didn't need to give him any loyalty, but they liked him. They liked him as a dorky, shy boy, right? They liked him as someone who was not impressive, but was had a curious mind, and who was someone who was very trusting and, just a good kid. He's just a good kid. Hi, Roger. Um, I do find I find it very interesting how when he is captured, how the slaver is talking about how well, one, he recognizes him as a young lion and talks about how they said it would be as easy as grabbing a lamb, and it obviously wasn't. And also, you see once he escapes and is with the Magus again, and they're talking about trying to escape Soonest to Atolia because of the Mead and the rebels and all of the things. Um, and Soonest says, or Sophus says that, why would they try and kill him? They need a pawn. And the Magus is like, yeah, you're not a pawn. They're not going to be able to control you. Now that they see you, they see that that is true. And additionally, if someone was going to control you, they have noticed that it would be me. So you and me, we're going to die together. We stay. Our eggs are all in one basket now. I do think it's very interesting. I think again, you see Eugenides not doing what he wants. What he wants is to spend time with his friend. He's happy, he's thrilled that Sophus has arrived safely in Atolia. He's thrilled that they are going to be able to, or that he's safe, right? He has spent quite some time wondering if he would be safe or not. But he is not willing to allow his influence over Sophus, and he definitely does have influence, right? If he greeted Sophus with open arms and affection and took all of the burden off of his shoulders, Sophus would probably be very happy to relinquish it to him. And Eugenides didn't want to risk that. He didn't want to manipulate him out of his country and have him give it to him because he's his friend and then grow to resent that, right? Because he was caught up in the emotions of being grateful and relieved that he had made it and that, the worst was over and he didn't have to worry about anything anymore. Instead, Eugenides is going to kind of hold him at arm's length and tick him off and be like, you're going to be angry at me. And if you're going to be angry at me and still feel like I'm the best option for your country, then I don't have to feel like I manipulated you into it. And I think that that is something that was really difficult for him and something that we should give him credit for. But I also like that the whole book does not have Eugenides and Sophus at odds. Something that I had kind of forgotten about, but I remembered before I read it was the pistols. And I think that it was so comforting to Sophus that Eugenides and Ennis, they both recommended to him to try and find another solution than just going scorched earth on his barons, right? And he did. He tried really hard. He spent a lot of time, effort, and mental labor trying to find another solution. And he couldn't. And when he found that Eugenides had also not seen another solution for him, but had wanted him to look anyways, I think he found that really comforting when he found that second pistol. And he had already decided on the path that he was taking, right? But it was nice to have confirmation that it was his only option, really. I also really liked that Addis. Well, I like the romance between Oedipus and Sophus. I do, as much as it does not, for me, kind of hold a candle to Eugenides and Atolia. It still is very sweet. And I like that the whole ending of the book, you basically have Edis, um, having secrets from him and him overstepping maybe and not, maybe doing exactly what he should, but um, their consolation is very sweet. I agree with you, and the different inscriptions on the pistols was both a further indication of that and a lovely touch for the reader. Absolutely. One of my favorite parts is definitely the inscription on the pistols, not just the pistols themselves. I also This is another one of those books in this series where you have a very interesting kind of view of war and battle. And even though it's kind of a small part of the book, those scenes don't go on and on and on. It still is an interesting little, almost bird's eye view of strategy and of battles and how the armies clash and what makes the difference or carries the day. Um, and I can't remember her name. I know it starts with a B, but the Baron's daughter that rescues him in the first place, and then is supposed to marry him, and how her mother told her that she'd be the one to marry him. And so Sophus knew that her mother was involved, and getting that Baroness on his side after the death of her husband and her army and her support. I just think that that's really cool. I also like, obviously, the media ambassadors, they just cannot help themselves, can they? They they obviously look down on all of the natives of this peninsula, it doesn't matter what country they're in, and think that they are just uncivilized, barbarians, childlike, not as evolved, not as, um, certainly not as civilized, not as cultured, not as well educated. They just cannot help but underestimate them. They just are so condescending. They cannot get out of their way. And their attitude towards women in particular, that the one line where so if it says that the ambassador didn't really see any difference between a queen and a maid, but would have seen a huge difference between a king and a farmer. But for him, a woman is just a woman. It doesn't matter her position. And also, yes, they're even worse with women. They really are just a misogynistic society, aren't they? But oh, what was I gonna say? Oh, the other thing is it was kind of funny watching the Mead ambassador try to play Sophus against Eugenides and, you know, kind of not realizing the bond there for sure. But also, that is a part where if Eugenides had never reconciled with Sophus, you could have played on his insecurities maybe. But again, you're talking about his hero, the person who literally took a sword for him that he looks up to, is in like his handful of people that he truly values. So it's kind of funny watching the ambassador try and talk about how selfish Eugenides was and a liar and a thief. I also really, really liked uh, towards the end, because at the beginning we see about how Sophus's father says that he's the only one of value, that his mother and sisters aren't important, and then you see how much he cares about his wife and his daughters, and that Sophus had kind of misunderstood the feelings of that. So he was not just someone who only valued the heir to the throne, who only valued his son, and that was the only important family member. That wasn't really accurate. And I also loved, again, in in correlation with the ambassador underestimating the queens, also the fact that while dangerous still, Sophus's family was able to escape because they just didn't view those women as any real threat. I also liked that Eugenides and Sophus talked again about how and when Eugenides knew that he was in love with Irene, and how it all came down to Dite. Hey, Robin, you're fine. You're fine. Obviously, you would rather be here than any of what you're dealing with. What else? I don't know. I'm trying to scroll through highlights is that word. I also liked, I'd forgotten this tie-in about how with Edis having the dreams about the sacred mountain being a volcano and erupting, and Edis being completely burned, right? And how she needed a way to get her people to kind of want to leave the only home that they've ever known. Again, over time, it doesn't have to be an immediate evacuation, but eventually she needs people to not just live in the mountains. She needs them to live somewhere else. And the fact that Sunis and Edis are going to be so tied together because their children will be the heirs of both countries, the rulers of both countries. I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, she loves him and he loves her, but I'd forgotten that was part of the solution to that. I also kind of like that Lazarus, the slaver, shows back up and is helping Sophus out, is doing his bidding. I don't know why. That just amuses me. What else? Also, sometimes you kind of forget that Sophus has been missing out on important context that the rest of us have been getting. So the fact that he's shocked at the gods being real is funny to me. I also know I saw a couple things in the end of the book and the highlights that'll be in my video about that tie us to the next book and kind of tell us what is going to be happening there. So ultimately, right, we see Sophus take the crown, take the country. He has his whole family backing him, his father's loyalty, which he wasn't completely sure of at a couple of points in the book. Obviously, he has Eugenides' loyalty, he has Edis, and he has the Magus. And I'm just like happy to see them together, and you know that he has a what's that word? Not counselor. What is the word? Advisor. You know, who is not only so good at what he does and so smart, but also you know, just firmly in his corner, completely on his side. I wonder if I have it highlighted too. I don't know. Also, I just think it's funny how as soon as one, I like, again, you see the world building this. I like how we see him at the beginning of the book as Sophus and how he becomes Sunis. And just the like interchanging depending on the setting and the familiarity and all of that of the different rulers being called by their name or by their title. I just find that kind of fascinating. But the fact that he, swears loyalty to Eugenides and then it's like, I'm gonna get married, and Eugenides is like, not without my approval, you're not. You just swore loyalty. So sorry about that. Just I felt so bad for him in that moment. Obviously, it's all to an ultimate end, but still. Oh, poor Souness. I just don't even know what to do with him. All right. I didn't expect to die, he said. I knew you would send help. Why? It was Souness's turn to be surprised. He said, you told me you needed me to be Souness. I am. I needed my king to send me help. You did. There had to be reinforcements at Onaya, so they were there. To him, it was obvious. Eugenides swallowed. I see. I think that I do have this highlighted. I think that this is, I don't know. It's just like, obviously, Addis tells Sophus about how she thinks that Eugenides doesn't have dreams of the gods. He actually sees them, and that for him, the veil is thin. And, he sees more than the average person. Also, she doesn't know if he just already sees how the world will be or if he forms the world to be how he wants it to be. But Eugenides is the chosen one in a different way, I think, than you usually see that trope. But a play on it, because obviously, usually the chosen one is plucked from obscurity, or is a long lost heir, or what have you. And in the first book, clearly we think that Eugenides is plucked from obscurity, but he isn't. He's just as important as he always was. But then also you see him not as a hero, not even as a obviously he's not a magic user, and despite his proficiency with fighting, that's not really, his strength. It's not really his thing. So you see the chosen one that is just an incredibly clever king, and I find that to be just a fun twist on a classic. I also like that, and we're almost done here, but I also like that they talk about how Souness, he could have retaken Souness, especially if he was a little bit older, a little more secure, a little just more sure of himself. Obviously, he would have had to struggle his way through it, but he could have retaken Souness with his father's army, and he didn't need Atolia or Edis. He didn't need to tie himself to them, and they just kind of tied him in anyways. And I just like Sophus just isn't angry just for the sake of his pride or his ego or just to be angry. He handles things like, yeah, it is what it is, I guess. He is sneaky. He is. But yeah, I don't know. So, not my favorite. Still great. Still a very valuable part of the series overall. And certainly a book that is necessary for the series. I think that your overall plot would feel just a lot less fleshed out without this book. Again, kind of like we were saying, just by sheer fact of we haven't spent a lot of time in Souness, and you need to have more than just the Magus as a representative of that country for it to really be a 3 country united front. And obviously we got another marriage set up, which is important for the unity of the rulers and everything. But I am a little more excited for the next book. I think it's a pretty fun one. I like it. And then obviously I'm a big fan of the finale. I think that it brings it all home really well. It kind of ties everything together, gives us what we want, and, is that big finale that is called for. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one a little bit more. But I'm glad that this one is done. I had a good time with it. I had a good time reading it. I'm looking forward to making the video. Again, it will probably be a much shorter video. I don't anticipate it being as long as for the other books of the series. But yeah, I need to write out all my thoughts for it and get it done. But thank you so much for those of you who are here in the chat, those of you on the replay. Thanks for joining me. Obviously, the fun of this is getting to talk to other people about the books. So I do really appreciate it. And it's just fun. It's fun to see what stands out to you, what stands out to me, and just talk about kind of the cleverness of the politics of this story and the characters, and how I want them all to be happy. So the date for the next one, it is the teens in January. The teen Saturday, I know that. January 18th is Thick as Thieves. So it'll be Saturday, January 18th, noon Eastern Standard. Are we in Standard Time right now? And then the finale will be the Saturday after Valentine's Day, which is February 15th. So we are right there. No problem. Right there in the Saturday that's in the teens. So yeah, I think the next one's pretty fun. So I'm looking forward to it. But thank you so much for being here and talking to me. And I will see you next month, if not in my comments before that. I'm actually doing another live show next week. Y'all don't know this yet, but now you do. My video next Saturday is a live show, and it's going to be at night for me. So like 8 to 9 hours from now for next Saturday, but that's going to be my entire TBR live. So basically, all of the books that are on my TBR going into 2025. So I think that'll be a little bit fun. So maybe I'll see you guys then. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.